Water is an unstoppable force that cannot be fully controlled. A flood can completely erase a town from a map in minutes. And here's Hurricane Ida in Florida, effortlessly washing away an entire house. A really unfortunate parking space. Giant waves clean Bikini Beach in Cape Town, washing even cars away. Though it looks scary, don't worry. This time, no construction crane was harmed. And here's another terrifying flood, destroying the streets of Turkey with streams of water, mud, and debris. Floods 3, bridges 0. Another point for the forces of nature. This is what happens when a river slightly overflows its banks. A flood in France turning cars into boats. And at this stage, it's unlikely that another concert will take place. And this is a flood after a major thunderstorm, crushing everything that gets in its way. Mexico has seen such heavy rainfall that this bridge crumbled under pressure. This shocking footage is of a flood in southwestern Japan. The Kuma River overflowed when approximately 20 meters of a river dam in Hitoyoshi collapsed after a heavy rainfall. In the most affected areas, cars and homes were flooded, while the residents awaited rescue on rooftops. Pacific Ocean coast in Lincoln City. Ignoring lifeguards' warnings, several onlookers ventured onto the shore to watch the impressive waves during the king tide, when suddenly...
Oh my gosh!
5 people were injured by the strong waves, falling into the surf. This is one of those cases where it's better to observe nature on video. King tides are caused by gravitational forces from the moon and the sun and typically occur 3 to 4 times a year. These powerful waves exceed their usual natural boundaries. To give you an idea, their force can move concrete benches, let alone wooden structures, which they turn into splinters. Mother Nature can get really tough when it comes to floods. Just recently, heavy rains hit areas of eastern Libya, causing landslides and massive flooding. In videos captured by residents in the country, huge rivers of muddy water can be seen carrying cars down the road. Many parts of the city were underwater, and the floods did millions of dollars worth of damage to houses and the public infrastructure. Not to mention, some people's cars were washed away for good. Just recently, in November 2020, Italy has been hit with severe floods that opened up big sinkholes in the ground, and a huge lake of water and intense rain pounded the country. Many streets were so badly flooded in cities that cars were almost completely covered in water. Massive rivers were overflowing their banks, sweeping away cars and entire houses and buildings. Edenville Dam failure. Edenville Dam in Michigan was built in 1924 to produce hydropower and prevent floods. It was located at the confluence of 2 rivers forming Wixom Lake. In 2018, the federal government deemed its condition unsatisfactory, terminating its license. But the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, EGLE, determined that it was structurally sound. On 19th May 2020, as a result of heavy rains, the Edenville Dam collapsed, and the Sanford Dam, located downstream, subsequently overflowed, which caused a huge flood in the areas surrounding Midland. In the town of Midland, with a population of over 40,000 people, this incident was referred to as historical flood levels. In this footage, you can see that the water destroyed everything in sight. In the aftermath of the flood, The victims filed 3 class action lawsuits against Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and against the dam's operator. A landslide turned a part of a tunnel into the gates of hell, creating a huge crater near the tunnel. Here is a view of a tornado literally at the epicenter. The guy filming clearly has nerves of steel. It's a good thing that the lightning hit a tree and not a person. Flooding destroys the Charania Bridge with its sheer force and sweeps it away downstream. Dozens of people run in panic from a tsunami ruthlessly destroying a city in eastern Japan. This is what happens when a small river in Turkey rages due to bad weather. Another bridge succumbed to flooding and was washed away in India. And this happened in Spain. That's what happens when you find yourself in the epicenter of a hurricane. They clearly built this house in a far from ideal location. The pure force of the hurricane that swept across Florida and left thousands of people in Cuba without electricity before that. Shanxi Dam, China. In July 2017, a powerful flood happened in the Chinese province of Shanxi. In 36 minutes, there was 32.5 millimeters of rainfall, which is an anomaly for that region. Heavy rains created dangerous situations in many counties within the Yuling city. The water in the Qingshui Gao Reservoir began to overflow, and around 1:50 p.m. on 26th of July, the dam burst and the water flooded the Dali River. Its levels broke all known records. As a result, Sui and Xizhou counties were flooded. Bridges and roads were eroded. Vehicles and stores located on the ground floor sustained serious damages. The water in the buildings reached 1.8 meters, 6 feet. People were left without food, drinking water, electricity, and communication channels. Over half of the residents were evacuated. 432,500 people required assistance. 68,120 hectares of cropland were destroyed. 120 kilometers worth of communication and power facilities were damaged. Was it possible to avoid such an extent of damages? Many people are sure it was. According to them, local authorities hid the fact that there was an accident at the reservoir and only admitted it after it was announced by the media. Furthermore, the level of danger was high the night before, yet the locals were not notified about the evacuation in advance. It's clear that for some reason the extent of the accident was downplayed. But why? In this video, you can see a huge landslide destroying a port on a tributary of the Amazon River in Brazil. At first, it may seem that a huge funnel is engulfing parts of the port. In mere seconds, dozens of trucks and shipping containers are in the water. When precipitation levels are above the norm, a catastrophe may happen, like in the Bolivian city of Sucre, which turned into a raging, icy river after a 30-minute rainstorm. The locals think that clogged sewer drains are to blame. Many vendors lost their stock, and some people had to be treated in a hospital for hypothermia. In 2015, the Turkish province of Artvin experienced the heaviest rainfall in the last 50 years. Over 6 hours, they had 4 months' worth of rain. Extreme weather forecaster Reed Timmer managed to capture a huge flash flood on camera as it swept debris from elevated spots. He managed to intercept the flash flood several times as it was making its way through the canyon. This dramatic footage is of massive floods in India in June 2013. The Ganges River overflowed its banks near the pilgrimage city of Uttarkashi and took homes, businesses, and hundreds of lives with it. This event was caused by monsoon rains that hit the country a month earlier than usual. Over 10,000 military personnel, 18 helicopters, and an Air Force transport aircraft were deployed to provide aid. Many believe that the disaster could have been avoided if not for the human intervention. The construction of roads and houses near rivers and mountains, as well as driving heavy trucks and ongoing hydropower projects. The river came down to cleanse Uttarakhand of its greed, said the locals. 2020 was not the best year for China. The country survived dozens of floods. The Yellow River and the Yangtze overflowed their banks and flooded large areas as a result of abnormally heavy rainfall. In Hubei province alone, the disaster caused $1.6 billion worth of damage. In total, floods affected 17 cities and 79 counties across the country and disrupted the lives of 38 million people in 2020. Myanmar. This dam was built in Myanmar in 2004 for the purpose of irrigation of over 20,000 hectares of fields. It was designed to hold up to 70 million gallons of water. The locals noticed that it was overfilled, but the officials claimed everything was in order. In 2018, the weather forecasters recorded an increase of monsoon rains, a common phenomenon in Myanmar. And on the 28th of August, the dam spillway broke. Floodwaters gushed through the villages and towns of Swar and Yadeshi, and people were hit with a catastrophic flood. In certain areas, the water level reached 2.5 meters. 83 villages were affected. More than 63,000 people left their homes. 1 person died and 6 are missing. People were able to return only when the floodwaters subsided, but many of them lost their homes. A total of 12,000 houses were flooded. And now you see the effect of the biggest Atlantic storm in history, Hurricane Irma, which took place in early September of 2017. The wind speed reached 297 kilometers per hour. It caused irreparable damage. For example, on the islands of Barbuda and St. Martin, the hurricane damaged over 90% of the buildings and over half of its inhabitants were left homeless. In St. Martin, Hurricane Irma destroyed an airport. On the night of 8th of September, the hurricane reached the north of Cuba. Havana was flooded. 7-meter waves were rising at the coast. As it reached Florida, the authorities ordered evacuation of over a quarter of the state's population. This monster finally dissipated on September 12th. When precipitation levels are above the norm, a catastrophe may happen, like in the Bolivian city of Sucre, which turned into a raging, icy river after a 30-minute rainstorm. The locals think that clogged sewer drains are to blame. Many vendors lost their stock, and some people had to be treated in a hospital for hypothermia. As a result of this spontaneous flood, no less than 10 cars were washed away and 4 people died. In 2020, Storm Alex hit parts of Italy and France, causing a series of the worst landslides and floods in decades. Witnesses captured on film the way force of nature destroyed homes, roads, and bridges. And this is footage of a flood in Seville. Just watch what happened in the town of Estepa, which suffered the most damage. The cause for this disaster was an extended rainstorm. Ruja Dam, Russia. In this footage, homes and vehicles are simply washed away right in front of their owners' eyes. This happened on the 8th of July in 2020 in the Russian town of Ruja, where a technical dam failed. Previously, the area experienced heavy rains and the dam began to leak. The specialists directed all their efforts to pumping the water out and fortifying the dam with sandbags. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and the dam burst. As a result, 29 household plots with homes were flooded, and 2 wooden houses have completely flown away. It could have been a lot worse, if not for the timely actions of the authorities. As soon as they noticed the threat of the river overflowing and the signs of the damage on the dam, they alerted and evacuated 52 private sector residents in advance. Thankfully, no one was injured or dead. Iowa City Dam. This is what happened on the 24th of June 2010 on Lake Delhi in Iowa, when a dam suffered catastrophic damage. The day before, the area experienced almost 10 inches of rainfall within 12 hours. The water overtopped the dam, the embankment and the roadway eroded away, and the lake simply emptied. The houses and other structures nearby were flooded up to the ceilings. About 8,000 residents of Hopkinton and Monticello had to be evacuated. Just imagine, they were only given a few minutes to pack. The official stated that most of the flooding occurred in the agricultural areas as opposed to the densely populated places. There were no casualties, but the damage is estimated to be worth millions of dollars. In Monticello, 50 homes and 20 businesses were damaged. The city's sewage treatment plant was also flooded, which left the residents without a sewer system. A powerful typhoon tore a house from the ground in Hong Kong.